Welcome to Death and Aliens, an in-depth look at horror and sci-fi TV from two friends who vaguely know what they're doing. I'm Courtney,
MK.
and how are you?
I did not think about what I was going to say at
I
all.
thought about that as I was asking. It was like neither of us probably prepared anything for this moment.
No. I mean, yesterday I caught up on so much TV. I literally just like didn't move off the couch for like 14 hours. Um,
Love that.
I now only have one. I'm halfway through the Dancing with the Stars Taylor Swift episode, and then I have one episode of Amazing Race and one episode of Ink Master, and I'm totally caught up, which
You're
is
killing it.
I know, but then I also sat through that entire Bills game, so it was something.
Yeah, I really thought they were going to pull
Um,
it out yesterday.
it was very stressful because the Bills. Let me just say, the Bills have not been the best this year. I fully understand that, and I get that the Eagles are a really great team. Um, but some of those penalties that were not called were so egregious. So egregious. Like that even the commentators were like, I don't know about that. So
Yeah.
when Tony Romo was like, yeah, I don't know why they didn't call that. That is not that is not a good feeling.
Very
Um
specifically when Tony Romo. Yes,
yeah.
that is so accurate.
And like if the Bills had lost and it had not been so egregiously not a fair game, I would not have been angry because I didn't expect
Mhm.
us to beat the Eagles. But it was like egregiously bad ref calling. And so now I'm significantly unhappy.
Yeah, I just hate the Eagles and I want them to lose every game.
I did laugh every single time that Travis Kelsey got a personal foul. It gave me, or not Travis, Jason Kelsey. It gave me
Jason, yeah.
joy. It gave me joy.
Yeah.
I like him, but I also want to beat him. So,
Right, fair.
but yeah, so it was a rough day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I actually do remember my story and I realized I forgot to grab it. So please,
You forgot
as
to
I was getting
grab your
what I was
story.
gonna tell you about. Yeah. So like 2 seconds, I'll be back. So I think I brought this up the other day on the podcast, but if I didn't, or if I did, my Myrtle book came in.
Oh, you did bring
Oh,
it up.
and I'm so excited. Look, it's got like logic puzzles and like other puzzles.
I love that.
I
Um,
am, and it's like clues and evidence. Like the weapons are a crowbar, a piece of rebar, and an old drum. Like, I am so excited.
I'm excited for you.
Uh,
Um, Dan's family were doing Secret Santa this year.
mm-hmm.
And like the website has like give suggestions of things that you might want so that your person can like shop for you accurately, which like thank God because the cousin that I drew, I was like, the fuck am I gonna get
Yeah,
them? But I was like, I am very concerned for whoever drew me. Um, and what they're going to say to you about the kind of person I am. And he was like, why? I go, because on here, I have some very ridiculous things. And he was like what? I go, well, I mean, there's some like cute candles, but then there's a blanket that looks like a cow and
it
a
tracks.
book and a book that's called True Crime for Adults and a
Did you put this on
sweater.
there?
And no, it wasn't on the website, and I was just scrolling
Oh,
on the website. And then a like sweatshirt that says silly goose with like a goose with a stupid face on it. And then a cookbook that is called From Crook to Cook, the recipes of Snoop Dogg.
a book.
and
It's incredible.
I was like, someone's gonna be concerned.
Mhm. But that like sums you up as a person.
Yeah.
And like it also like to an extent sums me up as a person, which is always very funny because we have so many things that if you look at us on the outside, it's like those are the same people that are walking on the earth. But then if you actually meet us, it's like, oh my God, they're incredibly different. I have no like there's no chance that we have all the same things that we like, but here we are liking all the same things. So yeah, but I'm so excited about my murder book.
I'm so excited. I can't wait for you to start like messing with it and actually like exploring.
There's a Colonel Coffee, which feels like someone I would name as a suspect.
Yes.
So like I probably wrote this book and just don't remember it with my memory.
I mean,
who knows?
that also tracks.
But logic puzzles are my absolute favorite.
I love it. I'm so excited for you.
So I
as soon as you were like, I got a package today, and I was like, oh my God, you got our murder book.
I did, and I got some new pillows, so that's also very exciting.
Oh, that is very exciting.
Reasons. I haven't had new pillows in like 4 years, so it's
so exciting
because they're so expensive.
Everything's expensive.
And I have a new coat coming in tomorrow. I got an Eddie Bauer coat, which is going to be the nicest coat I've ever owned, probably, which is super nice. And my mom got me a really nice North Face one a few years back, but this one I needed a new one. Because my shape has changed.
Yeah, when you shape, and also like winter coats, they go through some shit. So like, unless you're like really, really careful, they don't last forever.
And if you know me, I'm 0% careful at all times.
0% careful.
Yeah, so I'm super stoked. That should be coming in the next couple of days. So I had a little bit of a like Black Friday extravaganza where I bought a coat and pillows and a murder book because I have been doing my second job that I'm getting like actual money at, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to. I spent a significant amount of money not on Black Friday things, just on Etsy because I have a problem. But it's
okay. Some were for me.
Yes, that's true.
So it's okay.
Yeah. In fact, one of the second to last package that I needed to come in before I could start mailing things came in today. So that is exciting. The last one was still
deafening.
It was so loud that it cut out.
Perfect. That's for the best.
Yeah. The last one is still not here and still hasn't even actually technically shipped yet. So I'm a little stressed out because I would like it to get here like by the end of next week so that I can send things and have them get there remotely in the Christmas time.
But you've got a whole year. So like if not, we can make it a New Year's thing. We can make it a Valentine's thing.
That's true.
There's options.
There are options except for that the cards I got are themed. That's the only reason there's not option.
Christmas all year round. That's totally fine. I would be okay if you sent me a Christmas card in March. So like,
that's fair.
It's fine. I mean, I can't speak for everyone else, but like, I'm just like things. So it's fine.
It's fine.
Speaking of all this holiday cheer we're having, for our murder books and whatnot, could you add a little spiritual enlightenment for me?
I sure can if I can find a page I wrote.
Frantically flipping. I'm sorry I didn't give you very much intro for that.
No, it's okay because I don't know why I closed my notebook when I knew I had to read this.
I also don't know, but that's fine.
I am rare, and there is value in rarity. Therefore, I am valuable. Og Mandino. He's an author that I don't know who he is, but yeah.
Him.
I am rare and I am valuable.
That should be a mantra. That's a good one. You should hold on to that one too. I'll hold on to it too.
Perfect. Let's do it.
So excellent. You know what else I'll also hold on dear to my heart for the rest of all time? The Exorcist. And we have made it. Friends, we are at the end of an era. Almost. We still have the movie left. But like we have made it through the Exorcist series, and boy was it a ride. It was. I don't know if it was a ride like a roller coaster, if it was a ride like a bunch of men grabbing me in the alley and throwing me in the back of a truck and driving away, but like it was a ride. It's really close to the ride in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
That's a little more of an accurate description where you're terrified for your life, but like there's some fun moments. And like, are you gonna die? Who knows? Who knows? But maybe it's worth it too. Like, you know. So
Yeah, all that.
yeah, exactly. So to start us off, we are talking about season 2 wrap up because we'll have our DNA awards next week where we'll combine it all, highs and lows. They're coming. But I just want to give you a quick overview of what we went through this season because nothing makes sense in my brain from when it happened. I have placed everything in the wrong order in my brain. So here's the proper order. We start with introducing Andy's family and meeting Cindy.
Yes.
Who is not relevant whatsoever after the second episode. And then episode 2 is basically Cindy's exorcism. Like, of course, we get introduced a bit more to the Kims and whatnot, but like Cindy's exorcism. And then we're done with her.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have multiple exorcisms to show what they do, but that is
well, and also it's Cindy's exorcism is important because it's giving us hints into what is happening in Tomas's mind. That's really why it matters.
Yes. And then the third episode, we meet both Harper and Mouse. I do not remember Mouse being that early on, but she was.
I thought she was earlier, so that's weird.
Really? I thought she was like episode 5 for sure. No, absolutely not.
I thought the exploding the priests was like episode 1, so I was all fucked up.
See, nothing makes sense. And then the next episode, we move Harper to the island. That's the big impetus.
Yeah.
And then episode 5 is where we learn about Grace. Could have sworn it was episode 8 because it feels like it was so close to the end. I have no idea what happens. But it's episode 5.
That tracks. No, that tracks because I remembered it being as big a shock as the Angela is, what's her name? Shock.
But I thought that was like episode 3.
No, that was episode 5 also. Those were the two big like mid-season drop.
That does track then, but nothing makes sense in my brain. And then immediately after we learn about Grace, episode 6 is where we switch to Nikki being the demon. And so we are now in new demon territory. Episode 7 is where we begin the exorcism on Andy. And so we've started and it kind of takes us to the end. But then episode 8, we learn about,
because he kills Harper's mom in episode 6, right?
Yes.
At the very end? Okay.
Yes. And then episode 8 is when we learn about Mouse's past. And so we see her past with Marcus. We see her exorcism that she had, etc. And then I put episode 9, Chaos Ensues. This is the episode where Andy escapes. Tomas is locked in a dream and everything is chaos. Like, it's insane. And then, of course, episode 10 was our finale where everything kind of came to a head. It has the resolution to what we've seen with Andy. Everyone's dying. And then 6 months later where the kids are happy and everyone's fine. And, like, I logically know that was 10 episodes. And it feels like so much more. Like, it feels like so much happened.
So much happened.
Which it did the first season too. So, like, full picture, full stop. This is what we have our 10 episodes. How did you feel about this season?
I liked it a lot. I know that I was nervous because, like, I had seen, like, I had friends who said that season 2 was not as good as season 1. And I think the mystery and the, like, what Tomas's powers are and, like, the imagery was better in season 2. I don't necessarily know that the Island Witch was as compelling a story as Pazuzu, so I can see why that is slightly disappointing. I did wish that we had a little bit more focus on the church background stuff because I think we could have gotten farther into that story. And I'm sure that if we had a season 3, it would be a different reaction. But I felt like we only got just enough to keep it in the background and string us along, not to actually evolve that plot. And that is, I think, my biggest crux of the season. Like, I think that's the biggest thing that I don't like, is that we literally know nothing more about the Vatican story than we did at the finale of season 1, and that's not good storytelling.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, I think that these seasons, like, I know a lot of people did say season 2 was worse and it was lower rated than season 1, but
Yeah.
I think season 2 was, in my opinion, just as good, just in a different way. Because, like,
Yeah.
you can't belabor that story from season 1 anymore. Like, the
No.
whole point was to close up the Exorcist movie and
Yeah.
start this new
No,
story.
and I agree. And I think Andy and the kids were compelling characters. I think the way that the witch or the demon didn't stay in one person forever and like used what they had available to them, I think that's fascinating. I think that obviously, like, I fell in love with those kids. And I think that Marcus and Tomas's individual journeys with dealing with the power of the exorcism, all well and good. I just think that the real plot of the show is not the story arc. It's the what is happening to the church. That's the actual plot of the show. And in this season, I did not get enough of that to feel any satisfaction.
Yeah, no, that is 100%. And like Jeremy Slater, who was he created the show for TV, he was saying that the real focus of his show was Tomas and Marcus and their evolution and their interactions with each other. And so like that did overarch, but because the entire storyline of season 1 had that underlying of the Vatican, of the Pope, like you had to do something with that, and they didn't. And also like that's the other thing, is when you're looking at this season, like our underlying story comes out to be Mouse and Marcus more than like, because you know the Island Witch and Marcus, that's all like the main story, like it was with the Rance family. And so our underlying is kind of Mouse and Marcus's past, like we're learning about the past to move to the future, and it's not throughout the whole season. It doesn't start till episode 3, and we don't even learn anything about the past till episode 8, really, like 7 and 8. And so it doesn't,
and we don't
do that as well.
We don't get any more significant character development for Tomas at all. Nothing new is, I mean, he has these visions and we find out that there's power and it might be connected to the demons, it might be connected to God, we don't know, but there's no additional significant character development for him. And we do get some meaty Marcus backstory, which is fine, but Marcus's backstory is more interwoven with the damage in the church than we have information about, and we didn't get enough of that. Bennett felt very misused this season, and I just felt like showing how corrupt the Vatican was in the beginning with Bennett like getting kicked out of Rome and having these priests tracking them, and finding Maria saying that there's all these things, and Mouse continuing to say that we're losing, but we don't have a single shred of new information. And that is, whether that was what Jeremy Slater intended or not, that is
troubling.
Poor follow through.
And every time we did see the demons that had come from the Vatican or come from these churches, I forgot. Like I would see them and I was like, oh yeah, this is still happening. Like we still have to pay attention to this too. And I think that is one thing. Tomas definitely didn't have a backstory. It didn't have anything building. I think it is fascinating what they did with him, and I would watch 3 more seasons of him figuring out how to have demons in his head and not be possessed. But his was so well done in season 1 that it should have been just as deep with Marcus, and we didn't get a lot of if we were going to focus so much on Tomas in season 1, we should have focused on Marcus even more than we did in season 2 also.
And we got the whole discovery of his real, more confirmation about his sexuality. We have the Mouse backstory. We see that weakness. We see that beautiful scene in the finale where he tells the demon that the demon's right, that he did enjoy killing his father. We have a couple good moments. And honestly, the finale where he finally hears God's voice again was stunning.
So I will tell you, I was going to say this for them, but since you brought it up, I will tell you, I was reading an interview with Ben Daniels, and he even said, he was like, the interviewer's like, it's really cool how you hear the God, how you hear God again at end of season 2, and this was done in 2017. So they're like, can't wait to see how this portrays in future seasons. And he's like, or did I? Like, so it's also kind of in the air if like it was actually God or if he was hearing another voice to distract him. And I also
Which,
thought it was God for the way it was portrayed,
which,
but
well, and I guess the thing is, maybe if they had had more story to tell, it might not have been, and there might have been something else to go with it. But I think we can safely say, with the way it was edited, knowing, like, because I think they probably, when they wrote things and filmed things, they didn't have it, but by the time that episode aired,
yeah.
they still didn't. Okay. But with the way it was edited and with the way that moment became the finale of the show as a whole, I think it's safe to
it kind of has to be.
It's safe to rewrite whatever thought that they had going into it. It could have been another distraction. It could have been a demon. It could have been Tomas himself. It could have been a million things. But I think it's safe to say that in order for the show to have a conclusion, we get to decide that that's God.
Yeah, I agree. I think it doesn't make sense any other way for where we were left. And even if it wasn't intended that way, there's still plenty of room to interpret that way.
Yeah, because if we don't, obviously there's already no way to be satisfied with the show being canceled because you left the Vatican storyline so open, specifically with the Bennett piece to it. But at least with this show ending with Marcus crying when he hears the voice of God again and knowing that Tomas is the one that will save them, there is a hope that in what we don't see, we win. If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Whereas if we end thinking that that's another cliffhanger, another voice, another mystery, and then we never have an answer, it's just too many open questions to feel any satisfaction with the end of the show.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it has to be seen that way because there's too much else left. And so, yeah, I agree. So there are still some elements from the originals that we keep in there, the original film. They really shy away from the sequels for the most part, as they mentioned before they even started the show. What were some elements that kind of stood out to you that still kind of like maintained that feel?
Well, I think the one that was the most obvious was obviously when Tomas was a fucking crackhead and told the demon witch to take him and take him instead. And I literally all I could picture was the priest being thrown out the goddamn window. And I was like,
we know how the story is.
I was like, this is not the choice. So that one was the most I think deliberate. Obviously the idea of preying on the lonely kids is connection, whether it's intentional or not. Oh, I just thought of the other thing that I never got a goddamn answer for. The fucking rock.
No, the rock was the rock was just from her dead body. And so that was just a keepsake. But I think that's the moment that made him vulnerable and weak to open himself up to the demon. Like, that's the moment the demon was like, I could get you through, Nikki.
But because then we also have the question. Sorry, I took your question that you asked me and went in a completely different direction.
That's okay.
We also have the question of, we know that Nikki was struggling with suicide, with suicidal thoughts. Did Nikki kill herself because she was struggling or because of a demonic presence? And that is a question that never really gets answered well enough because the way that they focus on this rock and these memories and this island, it could be one way, but then the way the resolution happens and the way Andy's grief caused things, it could be the other way. And so that's why I don't feel like the rock was answered, because if he picked the rock up from when Nikki died just as something to hold on to, that makes sense. But also the way it was and the way that memory episode was shot, it felt very much like the demon needed him to pick up that rock. And so that's what I'm not 100% sure I understand.
Yeah. Well, I think he needed to pick it up because he needed to prove that that was how vulnerable he was. But I agree that like it's not an answer to Nikki. And the problem is that like they leave, like, you're right, they leave so many holes on both sides. Like it very easily could have been she was possessed, she figured it out, and instead of like fighting it or instead of trying to leave, she just killed herself so she didn't have to worry about like hurting anyone.
Right.
But at the same time, like we don't see any notice of her ever being any type of abusive, any type of angry. Like we only see her as this loving woman, and that doesn't track with being possessed. It only tracks with like depression. And so it's like, what happened here? And
right.
So I agree. We don't get our real answer to Nikki either, which is,
and I do think it makes
and
more
that could
sense.
have been handled in the season.
Yeah, I do think it makes more story sense if it is purely just a suicidal, like depressive suicide. I do think it makes more sense that way because it doesn't track with the history of this demon. But it also doesn't track that this demon would have waited till Nikki died to be a part of like attacking the family based on what has happened in the past on the island. It doesn't make sense that like, unless the only way to get in was to find the vulnerability.
Yeah. And also like it could have been, I mean, the demon still could have used Nikki and caused this depression because he was trying to get to Andy, who maybe was weaker emotionally, even though like, you know, Nikki had this depression, but like without the grief from Nikki, maybe they never could have gotten into Andy. I don't know. I'm just speculating. I have no idea.
No, I mean, so am I. But so am I, because it doesn't, I think while there were parts of the season that were really strong and really well done, there definitely are things that are more easily nitpicked. And I think that because season 1 was based so heavily on a story that we already knew, it wasn't as hard to fill in plot holes because they had all this source material to do things with. And now this season is the first time that everything is their own creation, and it didn't necessarily flow as smoothly as they wanted it to, which I do think might be one of the reasons why they were not picked up.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely fair. Because they had really good like baselines for everything, but not enough follow through on all of them. And they followed through with some of them that were really well done. And like, you know, I loved that they did the backstory. I love that they like separated the backstory from, we're not in the original exorcism world anymore, like because season 1 is all about Angela, all about Regan and Chris and all of that and her family, and we completely turn that on its head. It's like, yeah, these are still the people that were in the first season, but they're moving to the second season where this past is not Pazuzu. It is not another, it is a brand new demon that we've never heard of, but has its own history of like that goes even farther back than like Regan as a child. And so but then you have to follow through. Like here,
right,
you have to like make sure you hit the notes to explain more. And like the demon was explained pretty well, but like
I wasn't disappointed. Despite feeling like it took a really long time and that there wasn't like a conversation about like, I am this demon and this is what I want, the way there was when Pazuzu was like being showy. I did feel like I got the demon and why they stayed where they were and why they did what they did, because they were able to. And it was interesting that it was a female demon, because I don't think that we see that a lot.
We don't, because usually they're shown as succubus or like, you know, some other mythical creature. We see them as like banshees, we see them as sirens, we see them like a succubus, but like that's it. We don't really see them a lot in the traditional demon sense.
Yeah, and like there were elements that were like the witch mother, and there were elements of her that were a succubus, and there were elements of her that were the like possessed child. Like she was able to play all of those roles, but at the end of the day, she was just a demon, and that I did like that. But I do find there to be just some chunks that are hard to swallow when you try to figure them out.
Yeah. So let's talk more about like the Grace to Nikki evolution and how like that was that was like pretty smooth in my head. Like,
That was fantastic.
It was amazing because I knew Grace was wrong. I didn't know why, but I knew she was wrong. And then as soon as we get our answer to her, it develops into this new demon because it's like, no, you figured me out now, and I'm moving into a new demon, so you can't figure me out again.
I think it was that you figured me out, but also there was this element that when Nikki first died, the only thing keeping Andy stable was taking care of the kids. And having another kid to take care of was another distraction, another way to put his energy. And then once Verity found out, then once Grace's cover, quote unquote, was blown, once the violence started, the only thing that that Andy ever loved more than the kids, the only thing that would ever stop him from being a father was the chance to have Nikki back. So in that moment when he said, "You're not real, this can't happen," the demon had to shift to the only acceptable answer. And it was done so well.
And it did so good at evolving into the sense of like, I'm just back, no one's tearing us apart. But your life isn't changing either. Like everything's the same. I'm just also here. And it developed so much into like, everything's okay, everything's fine, to like, maybe we don't need the kids, and like tested the waters to make sure before it like really dove in. I felt like
despite the Grace shock actually being like the big twist and genuinely being like jaw on the floor gasping, I think the moment this season that genuinely made me feel the most like creeped out and overtaken by the demon was when in episode 7 no 8 7 was 7 the one with all the flashback stuff and
and Rose and him having a moment.
No, not that one.
No, that was okay.
No, I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about 8 when he was stuck in his own head and going back and forth and they were trying to break him out. And he just kept seeing memories. I think. Help me, right?
Oh, I think. No. I think that was 7 because 8 is when I started seeing the past about Mouse.
Okay,
and so I think it was the episode before that. Yeah.
Yeah, so 7. I just couldn't. That's the other thing. The last couple episodes blurred together, and I think that might have been a factor of the fact that we changed our schedule and we watched more at one time. Right. But no, the moment when Demon Nikki in the memory says they're in the garden, that was the most fucked up, well done, creepy without being horror moment in the entire show, in my opinion.
It was like my blood ran cold. Like it was that kind of moment. And it wasn't even like, you compare it to everything, you talk about all this other stuff that's happening, and it's not outwardly as scary. But psychologically, it's like, it's the one that gets you. And it's like, this is because it preys on the last moment he had with Nikki too, of her like being buried and being poured into the garden. And like, that's his last like real moment with Nikki. And now she's turning it around and she's like, oh, that's where the kids are. And at first you blow it off, like we talked about in the episode. But then the second time she says it, you're like, oh my God, everyone's dead. Like it's
so
jarring.
And you know it's not real because like as a viewer, you know that he keeps going back and forth and that the kids are fine and that this is a world. But just I'm going to give credit to the actress because the look on her face in that moment was insane also. And then but I just like the genuine horror, the monsters in the woods, the creepy almost killing, all of the violence, none of that stuck with me and like gave me chills the way that one moment did.
Because you expected the other parts. Like you expect that a demon's going to surprise you. You expect that a demon is going to be mean, that it's going to try and possess people. You don't expect that in the memory where they've already got you, it's going to throw another wrench where it's like 10 times worse. Like, so it's it was very like disturbing in a way that you wouldn't expect, for sure.
And I think you know why I think I know exactly the moment why it stuck with me the way it did, because there's one other thing that I've ever seen that did the exact same thing. Like, and that is in Shutter Island, in the flashback when his wife is talking about the kids.
I need to do a rewatch. I didn't care for it the first time I watched it, so I need to do a rewatch.
Oh, no, it was the first thing that ever really caught me on psychological thrillers. But there's a moment where Michelle Williams is just looking at Leonardo DiCaprio, just plain as day, and she's like, "Yeah, I took the kids out in the back and I bathed them, but she drowned them." And just like the way she says it, like nothing is wrong, but they're dead in the water. Like,
and also like you think about it, like this is supposed to be the best version of her because she's portraying herself in this really high level memory so that you have no choice but to fall in love with her and be in love with her still and see her as she was, and knowing how good of a person she was to be that sinister and still trying to be that like epitome of what she should be for him to fall for her and accept the demon fully. Like, it was, it's a lot. So what did you think about the addition of Mouse this season?
I loved it.
You loved it?
Yeah. I don't know that I love the Mouse Marcus romantic backstory. But the idea that there's somebody else who's just as fiery, who's just as anti the church, but also wants to save the church, who is able to do the hard things when someone else can't, who might need to be softened in the future, but who is the moral opposite to Marcus, in the sense that like they're both hard and they're both broken and they both want to do this no matter what, but she will hurt people to do it because sometimes you have to. And he won't, and she's going to harden him, and he's going to soften her. And I would have loved to see what their dynamic in the future would be, but I don't like that they twisted that by giving them that past. I would have liked her much better if she had just been an antithesis to Marcus, like with no past connection.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I was a little hit or miss on her, like as an addition. I love having that counterpart to Marcus. But like otherwise, I was kind of hit or miss on her being a character. Not that she did bad or anything, it just like the storyline didn't like hit for me 100%.
I also, even more than the antithesis to Marcus, I needed Bennett needed her. Yes. Bennett needed strong. Like she could have been to Bennett what Marcus was to Tomas, and had two pairs of successful things. And like I would have liked to see that. And I do agree with what you said last week about the fact that like Bennett had to be possessed because one of the four of them had to, or else we weren't going to get to the top of this Vatican pyramid. But I don't know that, I still don't know how I feel about it, mostly because we don't get a conclusion. All of my thoughts are colored by the fact that there is no season 3. But I do think that in the beginning, when Bennett was on the run from the church and didn't know how to do anything, and you saw all through season 1 that Bennett, while he knew Marcus was good and he agreed with Marcus, he could not reconcile Marcus's methods. But then he got to a point where the church was so broken that he didn't have a choice, and Mouse was Marcus, only meaner, and he needed that to reality.
And also, like,
him.
Marcus as a whole, Bennett as a whole never could do anything by himself, because you see in the beginning, he's following Marcus and telling him he can't do this. And then as soon as they're gone, he goes to the bishop that's like the only person in the church who's not compromised at this point, and that's the one who's kind of helping him along. And then after he dies, he's like lost until he gets to Mouse, and it's a very short period of time, but like he did need someone to kind of help him keep going, because he just didn't have that strength on his own.
And I think Mouse had been so long without compassion that if Bennett hadn't gotten hurt, there was an even greater chance for softening. I think that Mouse needed the compassion that Bennett had, and Bennett needed the fearlessness that Mouse had, and they would have been able to accomplish things together. But without each other, Mouse is hard and bitter, and Bennett is too weak, and that's why he got taken over, obviously.
And they both took different elements from Marcus and Tomas, because you look at Bennett and he has the knowledge that Marcus has, but he has that weakness that Tomas has. Whereas Mouse has, while theoretically being around as long as Marcus, does not have that knowledge that she needs, but she has that extra like chutzpah that Tomas has. Right. And so they both like crossover as well.
It is, and it's also interesting the fact that those combinations work or don't work. Like Tomas is both inexperienced and naive, whereas Tomas and weak, and and Marcus is all of the like up, and together they like fill in each other's holes. But splitting it the opposite way, by having the fierceness with the lack of knowledge versus the way that you just described it with Bennett and Mouse, they don't fill in each other's holes. They don't mesh correctly. And that is an interesting juxtaposition, because I think it goes into the way we think of character archetypes in general, where like opposites going together always works, but actually it has to be the right kind of opposite.
Right. Yep. Because just those opposing parts can work in one situation and not in another. And that is 1,000% something.
Like I think if Mouse and Bennett were running an ice cream shop together, they would probably be successful, because
if they were running a church together, they probably would have been successful, like in a non-possessed world. But being an exorcism was not where either one of them started, because while Mouse always seemed to think she wanted that life, it's not where her life took her.
But also, that's the other thing. That's another interesting juxtaposition. Marcus never wanted to be an exorcist. It was thrown at him, and he had to do it. Tomas didn't want to be an exorcist. He just wound up in a place that he didn't want to be. Bennett went to exorcism to save him. He chose exorcism because he needed something to save him from his weakness and his family and their poverty. Mouse chose exorcism as a coping mechanism for loving Marcus and not being able to do it. And so despite them having equivalent flaws, it shows that doing something because you need to, because you're called to, is different than doing something because you don't know what else to do.
Right. Which is like also the difference between Marcus and Tomas versus Bennett and Mouse, because like Marcus and Tomas both like they didn't have a choice in this. While Tomas technically could have stayed with the church, he could have done this. He was the only one that was going to save the Vatican. Yeah. So he had to do it. And Marcus, from the very beginning in his past, he was like, I don't have a way out. I was called to this. I have to do this. Where you see, Mouse was a nun. She wasn't necessarily called by God, even if she felt that pull. She made this choice. And Bennett could have stayed with the church. He could have stayed with the Vatican. He could have, followed through the whole time and never changed into this position. And he also chose to kind of go this way. Even if he was called to the seminary, he wasn't necessarily called to be an exorcist at the point. And so it's just that, there's so many mirrors and relations between these four.
And I also,
so interesting.
I also wonder how much shame has to do with it. What their weaknesses are. Because Marcus, obviously, he did a lot of fucked up shit. But he knows that, and he doesn't really feel shame about it, because he believes that he was justified in what he did, and even the things that he is hurt by and can't reconcile with, he's not ashamed of them. He's like, I need forgiveness. I've committed a mortal sin. I'm not okay, but I'm human. Tomas in the season 1 had a lot to deal with shame, and then we saw him come to grips with all of that and be like, I'm not ashamed. I was a bad person, and I now repent for everything I've ever done. And so like neither one of them feel shame toward their past. Whereas Mouse holds so much resentment for Marcus, and Bennett is so bitter about never going back to his family, and their pain and their shame is their motivator, while the other two are motivated purely by doing the right thing.
Right.
And that is why one is successful and the other isn't.
Yep. And I think Mouse also has shame from being possessed in the beginning when she was trying to, become an exorcist. She had to be exorcised. So yeah, that 100% lines up. So because I am not IMDb, I do indeed have some trivia pieces for you before we talk about speculating season 3 and whatnot. Okay. So the scene that you'd love to hate with Bennett chopping the nurse's head off that made no sense to anyone in the entire world was actually a scene from The Exorcist 3. So that's why it was in here, was because they were trying to stay true to the original series, even though they said at the beginning they weren't. But it was a direct scene.
I mean,
from Exorcist 3.
It did very much feel like more of a horror movie scene than anything else, which is part of why it felt so out of place, because it didn't fucking belong there. Like, if you told me that was a scene from Nightmare on Elm Street, or a scene from a fucking Saw movie, I would have been like, dope. But it didn't belong in this story.
Yeah, and the whole reason
I'm sure even in Exorcist 3 it fit better. It did not belong here.
They wanted to incorporate more from Exorcist 3 in the 3rd season, and so that's why they had it here as a quote-unquote transition piece, even though it wasn't, because it was jarring. And I don't know exactly what elements they wanted from Exorcist 3, because they didn't go into it.
And like I said,
that was why.
I'm sure if we had a season 3, I would have a lot of different opinions, but I can't make opinions based on that, only based on what I've seen.
Yeah.
And it is...
I don't know that I would have had a different feeling about that scene, because it was so out of place by what we've built up in the 2 seasons. So like, I think that still would have had that same jarring feeling, even if it aligned with something in season 3. Like, I still don't think that scene would have felt right.
Agree. I do agree, but I do think that there are ways to connect it.
Just there's more violent demons, or there's more like, and maybe he got one of the violent demons as opposed to the ones that have been around for ages. Like, because I mean, we saw even in season 1, like the new demons were a lot more frantic,
volatile,
whereas the like original, volatile, and whereas the original demons knew patience. They knew the way to like keep going. So
and like when Angela was I just wanted to say incorporated, but that's not the right word.
Integrated.
Thank you. When Angela became integrated and she came in as Pazuzu and just like stepped in and was like, no, I'm in charge now. You saw that even within demons, there is a hierarchy.
I mean, he was a salesperson, so like incorporated might be the right word, but like not for all demons, just for him.
Just for him.
And another trivia, I'm sure I've probably mentioned this, but I don't know where my season 1 notes are, so I can't be certain. But Alfonso Herrera was in a wildly popular band. Have we talked about this?
No.
So he was in a wildly popular Latino band called RBD, and hold on, my headphones acting out. So he was in this wildly popular band, and he traveled the world. It started in like 2006, so this is before the Exorcist happened.
Wildly popular in the Latin community, or like actually wildly popular? Not to say that I have any concept, because there's a lot more Latin communities in the world than there is, but like when I think wildly popular, I think like internationally record breaking, like BTS level, which
it was international. So they were internationally traveling. They were most well known in the Latin community. Which is how Latin music was until 5 years ago. Like, so
true.
We wouldn't have noticed anyways. but they were internationally performing, and that it was his life for a while. And like he was actually interviewed about it, and they were like, so now that you're done with like all of this, like, do you think the band's gonna happen? And he just like cracked up. He's like, we're literally all doing insanely interesting projects. Outside of that, this band is never getting back together.
No.
Also, it's like 15 years later, like
Right.
not gonna happen. But yeah, so super popular band, RBD, check it out. So one thing that I didn't realize, because I never pay attention to the credits at the beginning, because I just don't, was that Casey was mentioned in the credits of the episode she came in. Did you happen to see that?
No.
I didn't either, and I was like, oh yeah, that would have ruined it. Ben Daniels like made a whole thing about it. He was like, that ruined the episode. Yes.
So sorry. I just wanted to say I did look this band up, and they have gotten back together with all of them except him. The other 5 are all back in it, and it is since 2020.
So this was like 2017, 2018, he said it. It was like at the end of season 2.
Yeah, the rest of them are all together. He's the only one who isn't back in it. And 3 years later, January 19th, 2023, they announced that all members would return for a one-off tour, with the exception of Alfonso Herrera.
That is so... I did not do a deep dive on this band because I couldn't remember if I talked about it or not. And so I was like, I'm not going to deep dive because I may have already said it. That is insane. And I feel like there's some tea that needs to be spilled if he's not being included. It's probably he didn't want to be. He seemed very much done with that part of his life. So, like, kudos, whatever. Like, as long as everyone's happy.
Well, you keep talking. I'm going to keep digging into this because I'm very curious.
Well, I have the worst trivia fact for you of all time. So the scene in the past with Marcus and Mouse. Yes.
In an interview, he explained that he wasn't going to reunite because he was going to be working, and the only thing he can say is that it's going to be a very successful project, and he wishes them all of the success in the world. So there's not hard feelings.
That's good. That's what I'd want.
Yeah. He is doing. Oh, he's writing, or he's in a new Spanish language satire film called Que Viva Mexico.
Interesting.
Que Viva Mexico.
Viva's live, right? What lives?
Yeah, long live. It's like Que Viva.
Oh, like long live?
Yeah, but no, Que Viva does not mean how long live. It's like what a life, I guess.
Maybe. Like What a Life in Mexico, or like...
Well, and it's a satire film, so that would make sense.
Yeah. Or How We Live in Mexico.
Yeah.
Like that. Interesting.
Which came out in March. It came out in March of 2023, so it was right when they were going back on tour. Yeah.
Yeah. That's wild. So, are you ready for your most disappointing fact that I could possibly give you?
Yeah.
So, the scene where it's the past with Mouse and Marcus, and Marcus has this terrible blonde hair. That is what he literally looked like when he was that age. There are multiple movies that he is in with that same hairstyle. Like, they posted pictures, and I was like, this is bad. What was he thinking?
Okay, well, first of all, at that age, in that time period, it probably wasn't as awful as it looks now.
It was. I saw it. It was.
But also, the haircut and color weren't even what irked me. I didn't like them. They weren't great. But the fact that it looked like a bad wig, like it wasn't done well, that's what bothered me. Did I want him to have much different hair? Yes, in every possible case. But I also was like, wow, that's a wig. And never once in the show did I feel that way. And I know that, like, a lot of people, I don't know. And I'm very confused on how hair and makeup works in movies, because I work with Broadway, where even even if your wig looks like your natural hair, it's always a wig. No one, with a very rare exception of some of the male characters, no one is on stage without a wig on. Like, even when it's hair that looks exactly like their hair.
I think they're getting more into doing that, but I think it is a very new concept. Like within the past year or two, I've started seeing that more. But like
what do you
on
mean?
Broadway, like I know like some of the Six characters, they actually use their own hair instead of doing wig.
Oh, yes. Some of the Six characters they do, but they have specific hairstyles that they have to do.
Yes.
Because that's what their character does. But rather than use a wig, because different girls have different hair colors, and that's the whole point of the show, they don't. But they often have like extensions or hair pieces. Like one of the girls who is on tour, who is, I think she's now currently the lead Anne Boleyn, but when Six was here last year, she was the understudy. Her hair is gorgeous and red, but it's short. So she has a wig because it's her hair color. It's just longer. And so there's things like that, but like even things like, I'm trying to think of, like even things like when Austin Colby was in Frozen as Hans, his hair looks like that. He had a wig on stage at all times. And like, it was a wig that looked like his own hair with just the Hans swoop to it. But but it was still a wig. So in my mind, when you're acting, you're wearing a wig, which I know is stupid because like even local theater doesn't do that. But like in Hollywood, I would just assume that people would wear wigs, which I know is not true, but that's the way my brain processes it. So I just assume that everyone's wearing a wig, and I just can't tell because they're good wigs. And then I look at things and I'm like, oh no, that's a bad one. That one is a wig. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think they're less used in Hollywood than they are on Broadway.
It makes so much sense.
But they have a lot more time to do hair and makeup also in Hollywood than they do on Broadway.
And the camera gets way closer to their face. You would be able to see that mesh.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I also went through, because that was the few trivia facts I could find. I understand why IMDb didn't have trivia, because they don't want you to have trivia for this season. So I just went into like interviews with Ben Daniels and Alfonso Herrera.
Love it.
So one of the sweetest things Ben said was like, they were talking about like, what do you think that transition period was like between season 1 and season 2, where like Marcus and Tomas go on the road, and he's like, I truly think that was the happiest 6 months of Marcus's life. He was like, that's the only time he's ever been happy. It's like, that is so sad, but also so sweet. Like,
I just died. I just died.
I know. It was, I was like, this is not that like life-changing of a fact, but it's too sweet not to share. So I did. Also, Jeremy Slater, like, did not care. He told the cast everything all the time. Like, they knew every trick in the book before it was happening. They sat down to dinner before they even started filming the first season, and he just like told everyone that Angela was Regan. Like, there were no spoilers held back, which is more common that they're held back so that like the actors don't spoil it, or they have, you know, legitimate reactions or whatever.
Well, it is. So there's one of two things happens. Either they hold everything really tight-lipped so that nobody spoils anything and every reaction is genuine, or they tell you everything because they filmed every goddamn episode out of order.
Yeah, no, they didn't though. That's the thing, is like, this was pretty much filmed in order from what I could tell, like in a normal way. I'm sure there were some things were filmed out of order, but like for the most part, it was filmed pretty much in order. But he just like sat down at dinner and told them all. Like, there was nothing that like instigated it. And this was the same thing for like Grace. Like, they all knew about Grace at the beginning of season 2, which that was one thing, is like, they didn't know they were having season 2 until everyone was like, season 2 was renewed, let's film tomorrow. Like, it was like immediate almost. And so like, but it was still very early on. Like, he just told it was like, I just want everyone to know everything. And Ben was like, I don't know why. He's like, I don't understand why this happened this way, but that's fine. And then so also, this was really funny. So the scene where Marcus walks in and he's like, I'm so refreshed, I'm so like not sleepy anymore, everything's great. And Tomas thinks that he's, you know, feeling all of this energy, but it's really
everything I ever needed to hear.
Exactly. And so apparently they were both reading that on a plane, like after filming something or after doing some publicity, and they were reading the scene, and Tomas just like, or like Alfonso texted Ben and was like, hey, you're really going to hate this scene, because he had just gotten to that scene, but Ben was farther in, and he was like, just wait. Was like, and he was like, because they didn't, that's the one thing they didn't tell him. They didn't tell him what their own characters were going to do, like in a scene like that. And so no one had an indication. They didn't even put it in the script that it was a dream. Like, Ben said in his script, it said, like, after you finish that scene, like, wait, wasn't Marcus just sleeping? Like, that was like how they kind of indicated it was a dream before they actually had the scene that told you it was a dream. And it was so funny. And I was like, you could tell everyone about the Regan reveal, but not tell them what their own characters like are doing.
Of course.
It was so
why
funny.
not?
But he knew reading that scene even before they mentioned it, because he's like, this is so out of character. And he said that, like, he was like, I was the bane of existence for Jeremy and Sean, because he would like wake up at like 3 a.m. with ideas for his character and send like 20-page emails to them. But he did say they were really good about incorporating a lot of it.
Yeah.
He was very involved in his character, but it was so funny. And so he was like, I knew that this couldn't be right, because just
because Marcus would never.
Exactly. And his last thing that I was reading about him was, he said that, like, when asked about kind of like what happened in the interim of season 2, he said that he always imagined that he kind of stayed in that like same area, and he stayed with like Peter to find some happiness before the next like big thing came out. So he was like, I always just imagined that Marcus stayed with Peter. And I was like, that's really sweet. And he did immediately like spiral.
Oh, like in the 6 months or the 3 months that we don't see.
Yeah. So like, yeah. So in that time period where we don't know what happens after Marcus is on the dock, like, he imagines that he just.
Oh, I thought you meant between, like, because in that episode he leaves Tomas and says goodbye, and then we flash forward 3 months. I thought you meant in those 3 months.
I think it's all of that time period, like before and after.
Because I think
like,
that makes sense.
Actually starts.
I think that makes sense, but I also think that if he actually saw God, he would not wait.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right that it would be just that 3 months period, but.
Yeah.
So we've made it towards the end of this episode. So I have nothing left to ask you or tell you, except we know that we don't get a season 3. But if you were in charge, what would be your perfect season 3? What is the thing that you think would make the end of this storyline okay moving forward?
I think that season 3 would have to be a very big departure from the format so far. And I think that season 3 would have to go in on the Vatican storyline as the main storyline. I think that if you did one more storyline, one more like unrelated storyline, and then went to a season 4, it would be too much. It wouldn't sit right. It wouldn't balance right. I think that season 3, rather than having a story and like a foreground story and a backstory, like a plot and a B plot, it would have to be Marcus seeing God, finding Tomas and Mouse, and joining them to actually rid the Vatican of the demons. I think that would have to be the story.
Yeah.
And I think that there would be interesting things that you could do, because that requires them to do so many exorcisms that they could have lots of different little interesting mini plots. And like you would have like the B plot would really be like Bennett's journey. And then like the final showdown would really be them facing Bennett and like either saving him or not, whatever the outcome of this would be. But I do think that in order to successfully do that, they would have to actually attack the church.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like me seeing it end like this, my immediate thought is that Marcus hears God and goes for Tomas. And like that's the only proper answer. And so we go to Tomas. I think then it's the B plot, just like you said. And I think, we would even have to resolve the Vatican issue. And I don't know if we're going to make a bigger issue or if we're going to like make it more of a smaller issue of like, we got this church that was one of the big ones, and we got this church that was one of the big ones, and save the I for season 4. I
think that, I don't know, it's hard with 10 episode seasons, but the synergy of the storytelling and the way that it builds, I really do think this is a 3 and done show.
I was gonna say,
Like,
if it ends with the Vatican, it would have to be the end of season. Like season 3 would have to be the end. There wouldn't be
yeah,
anywhere to
and
go.
like some stories don't have anywhere else to go, and that's okay. Like some of these shows, like you see a lot of sci-fi shows that go on for like 15, 20, 25 seasons, and it's because in sci-fi there's always new things you can explore, so as long as your core
Sure.
characters are compelling. But I think that in drama, even if it's horror neighborhood drama, when something is a dramatic plot, there is a beginning, middle, and end. And you just have to honor that. And the reason some of these shows jump the shark or fall apart or stop being interesting is because they try to create more drama to keep the show running, and it just isn't there. Procedurals can go on. Procedurals can go on forever. Sci-fi can go on forever.
Sure.
Comedy can go on forever. But if you have a true dramatic story, you have to honor the beginning, middle, and end. That's how storytelling works.
And I think that's why something like a slasher, like a Nightmare on Elm Street, something like those type of shows can go on forever, because they die, they come back. They die, they come back. You know what you're getting. You know what's happening. Some may be done better than others, but you know what the story is every time. And it's just like watching, a romance. It's like reading a romance book, but horror. And so you know the formula. But something like this, and starting out so strong with like the Vatican being the big bad, like that's already going to limit you, because
when and I told you this in season 1, when the Pope was talked about in the first episode, I was like, they have destroyed themselves, because if what they should have done, if they wanted more than 3 seasons, if they wanted 3 seasons with a bing bang boom beginning, middle, end, great. If they wanted this to be like a story with longevity, the Pope himself becomes a plot point midway through season 2 at the earliest. Rumblings of things going wrong in the church, people attached to the church being bad, bits and pieces of information flying here and there. Season 2 ends with them coming for the Pope. Season 3 goes to what we saw this season. But to do and that's the thing, I think people are so used to long form television. People get so wrapped up in these book series that like go on forever. Like you have a million Harry Potter books, you have a million Game of Thrones books, you have so many stories. But what they don't understand is what the world building in that is. Like you could tell 15 million stories set in the universe of Lord of the Rings and never get done with the stories, because the world building is there. If you have a procedural, you have an NCIS, you have a Law and Order SVU, there's a new crime every day, and you will never get done with crime. You have a romance story, you can have their first date, their last date, their marriage. You can go for ages and ages telling the story of a couple, and it might get a little bit cliche. You might have to come up with different things, but you can go for a while.
Kids and then go from there.
But you can go for a while. If you are doing a legitimate drama, if you are telling a true story the way that 18th century writers told stories, you are not going to last as long form television. And that's okay. And I think that we've come around to that a little bit. The number of like mini series that we are on, or like the shows that come out on Hulu that are like, this show will only be 5 seasons done. We don't intend to ever go longer than that. I appreciate those because there is nowhere else to go. Like one of my favorite shows was The Last Kingdom. You guys know this. I've talked about this a million times. 5 seasons in a movie, beginning, middle, end of the story. There is nowhere else for that story to go. And while I was sad because I loved the characters and I loved the world and I got so invested in it, I was not sad for the story. I was sad for myself losing that like connection. But the ending of the movie there was no other way to end that story. It was perfect. It was well done. It was everything I needed it to be, and it was done. And they always knew, because it was based on a book series and because the lead actor was part of the directing and writing and producing team, they always knew from the beginning where they were going to end up. And I think that is the only way to tell this story.
And I think that's one of the reasons we liked Bates Motel so much, was because like, I remember we were concerned in the beginning, we're like, where is this going to go? It's not, but like, then it was 5 seasons and it was good. Like, it was well done, and like
and were there
liked
some
it,
things
and
that
like
were unnecessary and some things that they took
sure.
way past what they should have?
Mhm.
Sure. Were there some things that happened in season 1 that then never really got resolved and weren't even an issue in season 5?
Relevant, yeah.
Great. But was Norman's character arc from season 1 to the end of season 5 a solid story of a character's beginning, middle, and end as a transitional person? Yes. And that's what made people like that show.
Yeah.
And I think this show, I think there's a 2-part problem, and one part is their fault and one part isn't.
Yes.
And I think the part that isn't is the fact that they got canceled and we don't know if season 3 was going to answer those questions or not. But the part that is their fault is that they went so heavy so early that they didn't give themselves breathing room to tell the story. They wanted to shock you. They wanted to shock you and connect to the movie and be the Exorcist. And they did it all too fast.
I agree. And I think the way you laid it out before of like where they could have hit to make this be a 5-season project as opposed to a 3-season and done would have made sense. I think it could have been 5 seasons. I think it could have gone in that order. I think not only starting so heavy-handed with the Vatican, but having your first season be a continuation and ending of the movie also set up some problems for them, because then they have to dig their way out of that, because they're no longer, I mean, they're the same franchise, but they're no longer that story that's been told for so many years. And that also, I think, sets them up for a little bit. They tried so hard to follow through with that on season 2. And I think that's what got them canceled, was that like not being able to dig out correctly and like set up this new idea. Or, you know, like, what if we have season 1 is this Angela Rant story, the Regan story, and then season 2 through 5 is meant to be, you know, this other story about these other demons. And it's like, that didn't set up as well as it could have.
No,
and really I think hurt them as well.
And I think the issue, like, you and I enjoyed season 2 maybe more than season 1, but it's because we found Marcus and Tomas to be the most compelling parts of the show.
Yes.
People who do not watch TV the way we watch TV, and who are horror movie fans and who went to The Exorcist for The Exorcist, got what they needed out of season 1 and then no longer cared.
Yep. 100%. 100%. Yeah. And so on that note, I do have a few notes about what they were planning for season 3, because Jeremy Slater did an interview, very short interview and not enough information, but some information nonetheless.
Okay.
So he was planning on using this season to fill in flashbacks from that 6 months between in the 10th episode where we ended.
Was it 6? I could have sworn it said 3 months on the screen.
It could have said 3 months on the screen. The interview said 6 months. Who knows?
Okay.
Who's to say?
Yeah.
But like, he was going to use flashbacks to fill in that time period to how we developed from Tomas and Mouse going off on their own to Marcus hearing God's voice, or maybe not. But the main plot was going to be a draw to the Vatican, but it was going to be Marcus looking for Mouse and Tomas, because at this point, 6 months later, they're gone. They're on their way doing their thing. But he was going to do it by using his underground network of other religions. And so he was going to meet with like rabbis and see how they handled exorcism and go through all of these different like religious like explorations of it.
That could have been so fascinating, and I really would have liked that if they had introduced it earlier. I don't think I would have.
I don't know how I would have felt, because it's really set up with these seasons being so far separated. Like, obviously this is season 2 is very different story from season 1. And because Jeremy Slater wanted the whole point to be the growth of Marcus and Tomas, like, this would have been the next step in them, was him using his underground network that's been hinted at that he has, although as of now it's always been the Catholic underground. It hasn't been.
Well, and that's the thing is, so in the first season when we saw him talking to these people, they weren't his network. They were people that Bennett gave to him. It was very much implied in season 1 that Marcus did not have a network. Marcus had no one. So the idea of him having a network at all, I'm already uncomfortable with, because it doesn't go with what they did in the first place. But if they were going to go with that, while like Cherry and what's his name, Lester and Cherry were fantastic. They were clearly not part of the Catholic Church, but their beliefs and their studies of exorcism were still entirely from the Catholic point of view. And so what you needed to do to really set up this multi-religious network is have Cherry and Lester be way less knowledgeable about the Catholic version of things and have them come at it from the pagan version or something like that. So that because we knew that they weren't Catholic, but their doctorates basically were. And so like it still didn't lend itself to introducing other religions.
Yeah. And I think that's why they kind of shot themselves in the foot in the first season, because not only with setting up these horror fans for the quote unquote conclusion of The Exorcist that no longer cared after we got the conclusion. You also have this really big setup of Marcus not having a network, and then his network being these people that also were more interrelated to the Catholic Church, even though they weren't the Catholic Church. And I think that really didn't allow for much room to grow. Whereas if you cut it off and you just start with the beginning of season 2, I think that it does lend itself more than that, because we know that Marcus has a past that we don't know enough about. And so I think that would be more.
Also, what you do is you do more. Well, you do things more with the story that they had for season 2. You give way more, because Russ and Colleen and Shelby's interpretation was not Catholic. It was Christian.
Right.
It was not Catholic. Go way more into that. You're talking about a demon that is presented as an island witch. Go into the Native American traditions about island witches. Like, do more with what you already have to set us up for that. And they didn't. So it would have just been
if you're
new.
Pulling yourself out of a hole from what you've already set up that like put you in a lot of boundaries that you didn't need. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so I could have seen it being interesting. Obviously there's no way of knowing, but it would have been interesting to see. Ben Daniel seems to be living his best life out of the spotlight kind of now.
I was like, what is he even doing these days?
So I followed him on our Instagram, and he's just like hanging. Like, he was playing tennis one day. I think he's just like truly just kind of like living. I don't think he's really acting, not really doing a lot. Alfonso Pereira obviously is doing acting, which he had done some acting before as well, and more like Spanish dramas and some like soap opera type stuff. And so he's not out of the scene. Yes.
Oh my God. I need a moment.
Okay.
I just looked at Wikipedia to figure out what Ben Daniels has been doing. He, this past year, was in an Apple Plus sci-fi show. But then I saw on his IMDb.
Didn't see that.
Then I saw on his Wikipedia that he was in season 3 of The Crown as Anthony Armstrong Jones, the wife.
You definitely watched The Crown.
Yeah, no, it was the husband of Princess Margaret, who was like her lover, who was a photographer, who was the father of her children, but also like definitely like a bisexual, flaming, like cheating on her with men kind of ordeal. And I did not know that those were the same person.
And you watched those definitely at the same time.
Correct. I watched The Crown this summer. Nope. I didn't watch any of The Crown this summer. I watched it during last year. So it might have been just before we started The Exorcist.
Oh, maybe so.
I think it was while we were still doing American Horror Story. But I need a moment.
He's been doing a lot of like charity work and stuff too. That's what I've only seen him on Instagram. I didn't look at his Wikipedia, but he's been doing a lot of charity work, and he's been like laying a lot more low key than I didn't realize he was on a sci-fi show this year though. I'll have to check it out. But I just adore him as a human, and like reading his interviews.
He was also Pontius Pilate in the 2018 Jesus Christ Superstar on NBC.
I did see that. I did see that because we're covering Jesus Christ Superstar next week on Unseen Artists, so I did a lot of research.
Where have I been? Like, I know the name Ben Daniels. I know that that's an important name. I do not know how I literally watched all of these things within the last like year and had no idea.
I will say I did not know him before the show. But I also haven't watched The Crown. I didn't see Jesus Christ Superstar till a week ago. So like I'm not in the loop. with where he is. But he just seems like the kindest human. Like reading all of his interviews, the amount of times, like the number of times he said that the best part of the show was his like friendship with Alfonso Herrera and how wonderful it was and like how kind he was about everything and how much he loved everyone he worked with. Like he's got to be the best human on the planet. What is your next shock that you're about to give me?
No, I'm just looking at pictures of him in The Crown, and it is definitely him. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Well, from what I've seen, he doesn't really look different in anything he's done. Like you can tell it's Ben Daniels when you see him in something usually, from what I've seen in the past stuff.
Yes, but he looks so much more. I mean, obviously he's playing royal, but he looks. His skin is clear. His hair is nice. He's thinner. Like he's not rugged. It is him, but I do now know why I didn't picture them as the same person because the characters are so incredibly different. And he also has no facial hair, which changes a person's face a lot.
Yeah. I will say, like, whenever I picture, like, when we watch a new show and I see someone in that show, anything I've seen in them before, like, and I didn't already know who they were, I will never know that they were in something I saw. Like, I have the hardest time back placing people. I could do it moving forward. Once I've once we watched Bates, I have never seen Dylan in anything in my whole life. I think I probably have. I think that's probably wrong.
Well, if you have since Bates watched either SEAL Team or Fire Country, those are the shows that he is in now on CBS. Yeah,
I did not. But he was in a lot before, and I'm sure I've seen him in something. But like, I can't backplace anyone.
Yeah. No, I think that is all my brain can handle for the night is that Ben Daniels was Anthony Armstrong Jones.
Well, that's great because I don't have anything else for you. So if you don't have any last thoughts.
I no longer have a single thought in my head.
Great. Well, this has been our season wrap up, our series wrap up. I hope you loved The Exorcist. I know there were some hit or miss flaws, but I did end up loving it by the end, which is not surprising. I end up loving everything that I do a deep dive into, whether it's good or not. So who knows? But I do truly think this had a lot of good elements and was actually pretty well done for what it was. Who knows? We'll find out next week at our DNA Awards. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, if you have any thoughts, feelings, suggestions for our post-American Horror Story show, we're ready. I know every streaming service has changed every show they've ever had monthly, I feel like. So there's no way to know what's happening in the world, but we're open to suggestions and we'll figure out what we can. But yeah, so in the meantime, email us, deathandaliens@gmail.com. You can find us on all of the social media at Death and Aliens. Strongly recommend following Alfonso Herrera and Ben Daniels because they're just good people. Yeah. So do it up, enjoy it. But if you want to follow me at CECloud13,
and you can follow me everywhere at EMKAY_superstar.
And we will see you Sunday for the Stargate SG-1 Season 4 wrap-up. So we are just having a week of wrapping it up and partying and whatnot. So we'll see.
Fantastic.
So we'll see you there. Bye.
Bye.